So today we are going to be talking about various HTML rendering methods. So we have client-side rendering, which is CSR, server-side rendering, which is SSR, server-side generated, which is SSG. With the advent of newer technological frameworks like React.js, AngularJS, CSR is now quite popular. A lot of newer web-based applications use CSR. We also have traditional SSR way of generating HTML content. We also have SSG, which is used by a lot of companies to generate the static content. So here is a typical server side rendering. A typical traditional app could be Ruby on Rails, PHP, Django, or even like WordPress is an example of server side rendering, right? So we have a user requesting some content. The request goes to the server. The server queries the database, retrieves the information, and generates the HTML content at the server and sends back the response to the user. So this is like a traditional server-side rendering. But what happens at the client-side rendering is when the user requests some content to the server just responds back with a like let's say index.html, and the JavaScript code has the logic to render the dynamic content to the user. So it may or it may not have a database. In case if it has a database, the client side code would do an API call, fetch the data, and display the content to the user. So this is like an example of client side rendering. But what happens in the server side generated content is like we have a data source, and the data source could be your database, your markdown files, your API. So the build pipeline queries or fetches the data content from the data source and generates the static file one by one. For example, if we have a blog application and if that blog has 20 posts, so it would generate 20 static files. When the user requests any content, the server would just respond back with the already generated static content. So let's go through the different type of rendering pattern with code examples one by one. So here we have a SSR generated content. So this is the HTML file. So here we have a div and we have a H1 content inside the div. So in case if we had a database, we would replace this H1 content with the content retrieved from the database. It depends upon the templating library used. For example, frameworks like Ruby on Rails uses ERB template. So we will replace the H1 content with variables supplied by the controller. So if we see how it renders, so this is how it renders. Notice the preview tab has the content to show because we don't use any JavaScript to load the content. So the next example is CSR. CSR is client-side rendering. So we have a content div, but the content of it is empty. We will dynamically generate the content. So we have a post object. We have a render content function. So here we dynamically generate the HTML content and replace the container inner HTML with the HTML which we just have generated in the above step. So, and this is the function which instantiates the content. So if we comment out this and if we check, we have an empty page. And if we uncomment it, we have the content rendered. Important thing to do here is notice the preview is empty. So that is because the browser waits for the script to run, and when the script finishes running, it renders the content for the end user to see. So the third example is server-side generated content. Here we have a simple HTML file. In this file, we have a handlebar named content, and we have a data.json which has the data in JSON format. We have a simple script written. This script reads the JSON file, reads the HTML file, loops in through the JSON, generate dynamic HTML content, and then replaces the handlebar content with the HTML generated in the above step and creates new file based on the post title. So this is how the post would look after it is being generated. So you see we have post 1, which has post 1 content, we have post 2, and we have post 3. And when we see it on the browser, we see it like this. We have the post one rendered and we have the post two rendered. Notice the preview has the preview added because it doesn't wait for the script to dynamically load the content for the end user.